A woke council's clampdown on the Union flag now means a Remembrance Day poppy display will be banned. Barnsley Town Council prohibited wooden tributes from streetlights and lampposts to stop Brits flying the St George's Cross. In doing so, Remembrance Day organisers have been forced to pull the plug on Hoyland's poppy display. Locals usually hang 396 poppy tributes along the Remembrance Day parade route in honour of all the soldiers from the town who died fighting World Wars I and II. Barnsley Council's new rules mean there won't be enough lampposts to hang each tribute. The council listed a bunch of requirements and asked organisers to submit a detailed application 10 days in advance to continue their tradition. But locals said the rules were impractical. Chairman Robert Hill said, "I am genuinely disheartened that we will not be putting up the wooden poppies on lampposts and road signage posts lining the parade route. Following stipulations, Hoyland Town Centre, where we tended to place most of them, would be left looking bare with only the sporadic placing of poppies. There wouldn't be enough lampposts left to put them all on, and we can't put one up with a name and not another, as we believe this would be disrespectful." The council drew up the rules after the Raise the Colours campaign swept Britain, and flags were flown by proud residents across the country. Some councils have embraced the movement, some have deemed it best to leave the flags alone, and others have been active in taking them down.
The Labour leader of Hertfordshire Borough Council has described those that put up the St George's flags and the Union flags out on lampposts as a bunch of criminals, extremists and nonces. Jeremy Newmark made these comments in response to the Tory councillor Brett Rosehill's question. Here it is.
Do you accept that by constantly linking our national flag to extremism, as you did in the question, or the answer to the question, as well as many Labour MPs at the moment, that you run the risk of letting extremists define it instead of reclaiming it for the mainstream?
Thank you, Councillor Rosehill. Councillor Newmark, please.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Rosehill, and I'm sorry, but I'm not playing. I won't be taking lectures on our national flag and extremism from a councillor that has the audacity to speak in almost glowing terms in his question to this council about Operation Raise the Colours. Operation Raise the Colours. An organised and orchestrated attempt by a bunch of criminals, extremists, nonces, to hijack our national flag.
I've watched that clip now at least half a dozen times. Every time I watch it, I think, what on earth was he thinking? Well, I'm joined now by somebody who was in the chamber at the time, and it's the Conservative councillor Alex Clarkson from Hertfordshire Borough Council. Well, Alex, welcome to the studio in Westminster. Thanks for coming
Martin.
on.
Thank you.
It was an astonishing video. You could hear the oxygen sucked out of the room. What on earth was he thinking?
It's unbelievable. And one of those gasps that you just heard in that clip was myself. I mean, I must pay tribute actually to Councillor Brett Rosehill. You know, Charlie Kirk said courage is what you stand up for what you believe in, and that councillor did, as did our group leader. All he did was say, listen, there's some flags in Tower Hamlets and Birmingham that are coming down. Isn't this an example of two-tier? Look how he was treated. It's typical of the Labour, both in Hertfordshire and I believe in the country as a whole. Later on, I'm going to be joined by one of the national organisers of Operation Raise the Colours, and let me tell you this, he's utterly livid. He's a businessman, he's a family man. You know, he's been called a Nazi, he's been called a fascist, he's been called a racist, but even he was gobsmacked that it would be even a good idea to go down this route. What's been the reaction in the local area? Well, look, you know, in Boreham Wood, there's flags flying from lampposts and indeed across Hertfordshire. And that's the thing. If you look at that, you know, the march about kind of uniting the kingdom, you know, there was families, there was like toddlers in prams, there was pensioners, you know, having actually almost a picnic. I mean, there was the odd, you know, there's some odd violence. But if you look, Notting Hill Carnival's had more arrests. The Palestinian March earlier in September, more arrests. This is just typical of Labour's virtue signalling and the duplicity. You're all right. They bang on about diversity inclusion, but only if you agree with them.
Weren't we told that after 14 years of Tory division and chaos, we'd have the adults back in control? Weren't we told that the Be Kind brigade of those from the left, all I've been seeing, certainly since the Raise the Colours campaign started, is the politics of division. The words banded around like Nazi, fascist, racist, white supremacist. It's been astonishing. even I wasn't prepared for them to use the word nonce.
No, absolutely. It's disgusting, and I think they should be ashamed of themselves. Look, people are concerned. The way of life is changing. There is pressure on local services. They are valid things to be concerned about. Look how you were moved to tears about that poem that girl came on. You know, there's a case to be made, and it's a case that, as Conservatives, you know, we've got unionists in our title for a reason as well. We will stand up for British values, and that includes flying the flag. Listen, I tell everyone in Boreham Wood, you know, buy that flagpole, put it in your front and back garden, hang it from out the window. It's a flag that unites this country. It's a flag we should be proud of.
Why is it, and I ask people from the Labour Party this all the time when they come in, why is it that they do seem to be ashamed of our flags? What's driving it?
Do you know, I think they lost the political argument when the Cold War came down. You know, the world didn't choose socialism, so they go through identity politics. They go through our national identity to try and push their kind of wokey left argument. But it's unravelling now. You know, a few years ago, if you and I were having this conversation, we didn't, you know. But you can see now this issue is coming into the political mainstream. People are literally and metaphorically showing their pride for this country. And I think they do it because they divide and rule. And, you know, you're now seeing, I think, you know, they bang on about extreme right, and that's what we were labelled in that chamber Wednesday night. Yeah. Watch out for the far left. They're on the rise. We saw it in its extreme form. You know, someone who stood up to them, they couldn't beat him in debate. They silenced him forever. I think it's the far left this country needs to watch out for.
Do you know, I had that conversation with Lord Walney several times in past weeks. I had it since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I think something is going on. It's born of an intolerance. It's born of a sense of superiority. Has there been any incidents in your manor of people taking flags down?
Do you know what there has? There's been comments, you know, comments online. We get lots of emails from residents, actually, and I've had lots that people are genuinely concerned. Here's the proof. There was a by-election in this area at the moment. It was a Labour seat. The Conservatives won it. We stopped the reform surge. The Labour vote slumped by 34%. So there's the clearest indication that actually Labour's values aren't chiming with residents' values. No, there's no flags come down yet. The Liberal Democrats who run Hertfordshire want to take them down. They're unnecessary, but we'll fight against that. And I have a feeling that if they're taken down, they'll be put up the next day, not by extremist criminals, the stuff that Newmark branded people who are proud of this country are, but just by regular people who believe in the country.
Councillor Alex Clarkson, thanks for joining us today, coming from Hartsmith, Sears and Westminster. A pleasure to have your company. Now, we approached the Labour Party and Councillor Jeremy Newmark, who made these comments, but neither of them have got back to us as yet. And let me tell you this, Jeremy Newmark, if you're out there, you'd like to come on the show, you are absolutely my guest. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the Prime Minister is under yet more pressure as a poll out today has shown that people are not backing the Prime Minister whatsoever. And new polling from Electoral Calculus also reveals that Reform have an 18% lead over the Labour Party. Well, I'm joined in the studio by the founder of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter. Martin, always an absolute pleasure. So first of all, let's get to an exclusive poll we done for GB News on Sir Keir Starmer's leadership and the public's faith in him. It's not looking very good.
Good afternoon, Martin. We asked the public a simple question: should Keir Starmer remain as Prime Minister or resign? And over the whole public, 54% said he should resign, 20% said he should stay, and the rest didn't know. So as a majority of the public think he should go. But obviously that includes his political opponents, Conservative and Reform supporters and other parties. Also, more interestingly, we looked at what Labour voters, people who voted Labour in 2024, said. They were obviously much more enthusiastic about Keir Starmer, but only to a degree. 50% on our figures, 50% of Labour voters thought Keir Starmer was the right man for the job as Prime Minister. 26% didn't know, were scratching their heads a bit, wondering, you know, maybe not. And 24% of Labour voters thought he should resign. So only about half of Labour voters have confidence in Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, which is, it's not the worst figures it could be, but it's not very good figures. So it's it establishes or reaffirms the fact that Keir Starmer is not so popular with the public or indeed with Labour Party voters. 54% saying he should go. If it's 52% like Brexit, he'd probably say, oh, let's have 3 votes and go again and campaign for 3 years against it. I digress. It's grim reading for him. It sincerely is. Meanwhile, a new poll out today from Find Out Now has Reform with a record 18 points clear of the Labour Party on 34%. But Martin Baxter, what you do so wonderfully for us here at GB News, you combine across the week's polls to get a more accurate figure.
What does that show us?
Yes, this Find Out Now poll shows a Reform lead of 18%. We think it's a little more helpful to take an average of recent polls, including that Find Out Now poll, but also polls by other pollsters. We find not a similar picture, frankly. A Reform lead of 12%, which is still very big historical terms. We've got on the poll of polls Reform on 32%, Labour behind on 19, less than 20, and the Conservatives on 17%. And when we translate that into seats, that's a whopping majority for Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, 403 seats we calculate, which would be a Reform majority of 156, bigger than Tony Blair and Keir Starmer last year. Labour less than 100 seats on 93. Liberals on 62 and the Conservatives reduced to fifth place on 27.
That's actually a lot better than the Find Out Now poll. It had the Labour Party on 44 seats. That's just extinction level event.
If it
44.
were, yes, if it were an 18% lead, and it might be, Find Out Now might be right on that. If it were, that would be terrible for Labour. But even taking the, doing the grown-up thing and looking at the average rather than just a single poll, it still looks awful for Labour and very good for Reform at the moment.
And Martin Baxter, as well as amalgamating this week's polls, and by the way, I thought what was fascinating about this week's poll, particularly the Find Out Now poll, the polling was carried out during the state visit. Now, ordinarily, you'd expect there to be a polling boost for a premier, hosting a president, the pomp, the pageantry, Windsor Castle. That hasn't happened for Keir Starmer. So far, there's been no upward tick in him being seen as an international statesman.
Yes, so far that's the case. I mean, it could be that amongst Labour voters or centre-left voters, Donald Trump is not perhaps the most popular American president, so a big meeting with him maybe doesn't play so well with the public. Although Keir Starmer, on the whole, had a fairly good 2 days. Nothing went wrong, so diplomatically it was successful, but politically it may not have achieved very much.
But it is fascinating to consider that perhaps hobnobbing with a man that a lot of Labour voters, let's be frank, probably don't like very much, could potentially backfire. And it might not gel with people who vote Reform. They might not necessarily believe that Keir Starmer's heart is in it. Martin, you've got a third graphic for us now, one I find the most fascinating in many ways. This is the geographical split. If we look at the electoral map of if your poll of polls became real, look at that. It's a turquoise tidal wave. Talk us through it.
Yes, well, as you say, a lot of the light blue of Reform sweeping the country through the Red Wall in the north, even the northern urban areas like Liverpool and Manchester and into Yorkshire, through the Midlands and indeed large chunks of the south. Only sort of central London remains as a Labour stronghold, and the SNP obviously doing better in Scotland on these figures. Reform are doing quite well in Scotland, but not enough to take a lot of seats yet.
And what's really fascinating, there was a by-election in Cardiff overnight, and Cardiff is down as a die-hard Labour seat. They slipped 31 percentile in Cardiff. Reform put on 39%. Cardiff has gone to Reform, award there for the first time ever. We're seeing Plaid Cymru doing well, but really the Conservatives being forced out. Labour Party, once again, the pattern we see week in, week out, Martin Baxter, Labour being forced back into city centres, into university towns, and the provinces being swept by that turquoise tidal wave. Martin Baxter, thank you as ever for joining us and bringing us fully up to speed. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you.